Hello, this is Paper Cuts Included coming to you live from the Ninja Turtle sleeping blanket, and that's how we keep it legit. Today we are looking at one of my favorite books of all time, and what I would argue one of the books that deserves to be in the top 100 books of all time. That being Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely's miniseries We3 number 1. But before we get into this, if you're new to the channel, this is a comic book YouTube channel ran by me, Landon, and my co-host Dylan Dog. We're both two working artists who were inspired by cartoonist kayfabe to create a channel of our own. So what does that mean? Well, if you like comic books, comic book artist, art in general, we put stuff like that under this camera, which we call the microscope, and we talk about it. We dissect it, talk about the technical skills of it, talk about the history of it, all for, hopefully to spawn some more comic book lovers and art lovers. So if that sounds like something you're into, stick around. Hit that notification bell. We post every Tuesday and Friday. Like so we can get more videos out, and subscribe so you never miss a video that comes out. Because some of these books, hopefully one day when we talk about them, jump up a little bit in price. So today, like I mentioned, we're going to be looking at the first issue of We3. If you watched our previous video, you saw how excited I was to have bought this. This was a very recent purchase for me. I have read this probably about a year or two ago because of cartoonist kayfabe and fell in love with it. It's one of my favorite books. It's a book I believe all comic book lovers should read, all artists should read, because you're going to get blown away by Frank Quitely's artistic skills. But who is Frank Quitely? If you're new to this, Frank Quitely is an artist who's worked on several great pieces, such as We3 as my favorite, New X-Men, where he has some controversial costume designs. I know a lot of people hate on those, and probably one of his most famous works, All-Star Superman, which, if you're a longtime viewer, was one of our very first videos. We looked at All-Star Superman number 1, which we will link in the description if you want to check that out and make a post about it. And who's Grant Morrison? Well, Grant Morrison's the writer, and Grant Morrison is probably one of the most famous writers in comics. He's not the Sandman guy, which I think a lot of people think he is, but Grant Morrison does a lot of Batman work, a lot of Superman work. He did one of my favorite Batman stories, Arkham Asylum, or A Serious House on a Serious Earth. He's done We3, of course. Also New X-Men with Frank Quitely. So we have a little bit of a tag team right here. But let's get into why I love We3. We'll look at the art. We'll talk about the issues. There's not too many issues. And this is one of those videos I'll probably fanboy out a lot about. So let's talk about the cover. One of the things I used to do when we looked at my issues was, how good's the cover? A cover needs to be great. It needs to be stellar. It needs to draw that attention in from viewers. Because if you don't have a good cover, some people might just walk past it to begin with, and you can't have people walk past your book. That's how you keep your lights on, is selling your book. So you need a pretty interesting cover, and sometimes I'm sure that's a percentage of sales right there, is how good your cover. I really like this cover. I think this book came out in 2004. I'm sure it looked very different compared to its competitors. I don't know if some would argue that, it being so different would help it or dishelp it or do a disservice. To be fair, I probably wouldn't have picked it up. I would have seen a dog, assumed it's some kid's book, because it does have that kid's, like a kid did this, and in a good way, like a kid set up this missing poster, which, hate to break it to you, this is not a happy-go-lucky comic. This is a very depressing comic. Don't let PETA see that you're reading this, or maybe do let them see. They might actually love this book. Grant Morrison is an animal lover. He did a very extended and amazing run on Animal Man, which might have been the first title I actually read of his. So let's get into it, though. But I like the cover. I'd give it maybe a 6 or 7 out of 10. But no, we're going to be blown away by the art. And we're also going to talk about the ads, the coloring. But, let's just start dissecting it, of course. It's been a while since I dissected a book, so it might take me a little getting back on the bicycle to be effective at it. But one of my few complaints with this book is there's a lot of grays, browns, which some will argue at the end of the series makes up for it, because the end's very bright, very upbeat with color, but the beginning and the middle and near the end, it's just dull to me. It's dull, I think, a little too dull at times, but I don't want to beat a dead horse. One of the things I really like about Frank Quietly is I feel like he thinks about the smallest things and illustrates them. He illustrates that this guy, at that perspective, has his shoelaces are untied, but that shoe's not. I think that's really ingenious. That was something I noticed rereading it today. Is he illustrated untied shoes in a perspective where, it's not the focal point. You know what I mean? I feel like a lot of people, when they untie a shoe, it's to show the characters a little bit of a klutz. Here, we never even hear this character talk. We don't know who he is other than his name. He has, he's only in it for like 3 pages, but yet his shoe's untied, and that's something I think puts Quietly above some other artists is he is a master of body language, a master of the small things, and if that's something you want to do more at comic books, definitely check this book out. Definitely check out All Star Superman for his body language between Clark Kent and Superman. But no, this is what I like. So We3 is about 3 cybernetic pets, or they're pets that get kidnapped by the U.S. government, turned into these cybernetic monsters, and this beginning is their first potential mission, taking out this terrorist. So, I know I usually complain about the color, but I actually like this. It's, we see it. To me, it really reads as this is a dark room being projected by a TV. I think it really works here. I love that there's a lot of negative space over these 2 pages. I feel like a lot of people don't know how to use negative space, not apparently, effectively. And I think Frank does a really good job here. He also does an amazing job hiding our main characters for like half the book. But he's all, like I said, with body language, people's feet crossed, people's arms over in plain old folding chair, people slouched over just drinking a beer, having a good time. We've seen that scene 1,000 times probably in our own lives. But something's going on, right? And now these insect-looking monstrosities are heading towards, this poor schmuck. And the first time I read this book, I thought those were insects. I think he sells it really good of like beetles, which is important, and we'll get to that near the end of the issue. But no, the beads of sweat coming off the guy, has redder eyes, probably because he just worked out. Probably some workout pills or some. Again, the untied shoelace, just really good at the little things, right? And what's gonna happen? Oh, not yet. So our poor schmuck is gonna try to defend himself and fires blindly straight into this door. Hope his mom wasn't on the other side, right? Even look how detailed that bullet casing is, right? Jeff Darrow, Frank Quietly, just impeccable at the small details, right? Just all those little bullets on the ground, it's great. And I don't think we ever see this guy's face fully. It's always cut in a way. Again, untied shoelace, and he keeps that. He never tied it, and that's something I like. He kept that small thing for the entire run of this character, and one of the showstoppers of this first issue. Excuse me. This guy getting blown to smithereens by bullets, mines, no one really knows what. I don't really know what. This is one of those images I can stare at for hours and still just be amazed by it. Look, and there's my untied shoe again. I'm sure he must have done this on layers and layers and layers. We have a video on tracing paper. I don't know if he did tracing paper or what, but this is just you can't do this all on just one piece of paper. I imagine there was probably multiple he stacked on to get this image. I'm sure the body was one image, the bullets were probably the last image, maybe even some of the guts and stuff were an image, and just seeing what works, seeing what doesn't, because comic book is not a easy endeavor. If it takes 100 pages to get it right, it takes 100 pages to get it right. And I would love to see the original art for this series. This is probably one of my most wanted artist editions. Let's make that happen. If this channel ever gets big, I'm starting it here. We want the We3 Artist Edition because it would be incredible. But his detail work, I'm sure he looked up where these organs were, like the intestines. There's a molar coming out, parts of bone, parts of gray matter. It's impeccable. Like I said, this is probably my showstopper image for this book, at least this first issue. Damn near the whole book too. Like this image just sticks to me so well. Like it's probably, if I have to describe this book in one image, this is it, and it has none of the characters in it, right? And now we see the aftermath. All the guards are dead as these mysterious things, we don't know what yet, are just walking down. Here's three of them. Now we know there's three, and they're like manga-esque 90s armor. I think that's something a lot of people don't talk about, is how like almost anime inspired these designs are. That sleek. We'll get to that when we see a better image of them. But no, they're going in. They're in something, a truck, and there they're going. And here again, just that gray, brown color scheme. I don't really know what I'd want to be better, but I don't know. It does not. Let's see. I brought the trade, and I'm gonna see if that looks a little different in the. It's a little different. I don't know if you guys. Yeah, it's a whole different. Like it's a little bit warmer. And that's what just making a little bit warmer, less, it's not sterile, but, just a little too clean for my liking, I think. But maybe it's supposed to, do that so it shows, it really lets the fire just be so much more, right? Maybe you don't get that sense of fire if these are warmer. I don't know. And here's another one, the small things. We just learned what happened. That's what happened. Guerrera assassinated. And what's one of the little things Frank quietly does to show it? Well, the newspaper clerk is cutting it with the box cutter, and it leaves a whole cut line and even cuts it. This poor lady has a, partially cut down the middle newspaper. And again, something I just noticed today, but really enjoyed it, really liked it. It's something I want to do more in my art, is just doing the little things really effectively. Because, hey, maybe 90% of your audience doesn't notice it, but that 10%, I'm sure they might even become fans of it. So just think about it. What are the little things you can show in your comic or even your art in general or your life that just gets maybe that 10% attention that can become 100% fandom? And another one of my favorite images right here is the like pet truck of bringing those cybernetic animals from the base to whoever they're trying to kill, I guess, or not trying, because I don't think they ever not succeed. And just the body language again of these guys just sitting back. I think one of them's even smoking a cigarette. It to me reminds me of some Akira scenes of just in book 2 or book 3 when it's Tetsuo's at the facility and you have all of the military just lounging about in some scenes. It really reminds me of that. It's probably the hat, because I think all the military guys in Akira have that same hat, and maybe that Frank quietly saw that and wanted to add his own. This is a little Akira esque with the cybernetic monsters. But again, the body language, they're probably talking about what was on last night's Wheel of Fortune. You can tell those guys are working. It's impeccable. Not only that, but the color difference, this is probably 10 o'clock in the morning versus, red light, military, covert ops. It, maybe again, that's why you have the colors kind of be a little dark. So then you can really just highlight this. And I love that the truck is just, an outline. I think if the truck wasn't an outline, you lose a lot of that flair. But because it's an outline, it really brings it out. The colors, the figures and the colors, but it looks really good. Again, here's a different way you can do it back of a truck. I'm sure some people have probably swiped this after seeing this. So always, 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 when you're reading something or looking at art, think of what fascinates you and what can you implement in your own work, while still giving credit to the people you get inspiration from, of course. So let's keep looking. Yep. So now we have bright colors again. Now we know it's the United States Air Force. And look, there they are. not a really dramatic, you know, showing. If this was a modern comic, these three would be the whole panel, and then the next page would be probably a splash of just these three. But nope, our killers are a golden retriever mix, or I think it's a Labrador mix, not golden retriever, a cat and a bunny. What an I get the dog and the cat, but I've always wondered why they chose a rabbit for the third animal. Well, I think it would have been cool if we got a turtle, but maybe Kevin Eastman and Laird already did too many turtles. But no, let's take another moment, and now we get the name of the book, and I don't know what page this is, but it's a pretty far way to finally get into it. But again, the designs, I think these are very manga inspired at times. The sleek, rounded contours, like almost Robotech, or some of the Gundam designs. I wonder if Frank quietly looked at that. I know he has an affinity for Akira, I believe. I remember hearing from a cartoonist kayfabe interview of his. So I wonder what elements of that go into his creative process, you know, or if that was unintentional, intentional. That's why I want the artist edition of this so bad, so I can learn what and why he did it. Um, this is what they look like on the front of the trade. You see how bright they are? They're freaking. When I see this cover, all I can think about is Easter. They just look like giant Easter eggs to me, and it probably doesn't help that there's a rabbit. You know, what's that look like in the trade? Makes it look pretty much the same, except this is how since it's a trade, there's no ad, so it's just okay. Yeah, we're gonna have to look at the trade for some parts just to see how stuff lines up because I'm curious about that, and that's something you should think about when you're designing a book: is page layout. Where's the ad gonna be if there's gonna be an ad? Where's not the ad gonna be if there's not an ad? But no. So it's not only those three animals that are getting experimented on. There's also probably thousands of rats at any given moment in this program as too. What's the point of them? Well, a few. Does it say? Is it a few hundred? A whole rat colony within 48 hours can put together a turbine engine for a jet with just spare parts. So that's the meat and potatoes of this program. We turned out is just that animal controlled to, I guess, make crap for the military. And how are they controlled? Well, in the words of Eddie P. and his discussion of this book, a Seal Clubber Xbox One controller, which to me looks more like one of those bootleg plug and play controllers I saw as a kid. And they some people talk about this book being a representation of early drones and that controversial history within the United States. I don't really know a whole lot about the drone program and that, so I don't want to put my foot in my mouth, but I can definitely see this book being a talk about it. These animals being controlled thousands of miles away, but doing damage. But instead of, a drone strike doesn't have personality. It's a cold hearted machine, right? These machines actually have heartbeats, brains that are doing the damage, but they're still being controlled for the most part. That'll change in this issue. But one of my favorite character designs is being this drill mouse. Inventive, right? One of the small things, too, I don't think it'll pick up on screen at all, but all the rats, their implants have this like blood look on them. Like like maybe a hair's away from getting infected. And I mention that because I wonder if that's part of it. They've probably done this to millions of rats, and they probably don't last long. They're inexpendable, which they're rats, but still, they're still a living being with a heartbeat, a brain. If we put that on humans, then it becomes a whole different argument, right? How could you do this to people? But yet, you know, Grant Morrison is showing that these scientists and the senators that they're showing are, enthralled that, you know, these castaways can put together a jet engine in 48 hours. And maybe that's the only thing they can do before they expire. We know that these things have expiration dates, as we'll talk about later in the issue. But just food for thought, right? His tail work. His tails. I don't know why I like the tails so much, but they look really like almost menacing. Like, you don't think about a rat tail being that, like, I don't know. You think of rat tail, you think of just a rat tail, right? But here I think almost tentacly, and it just, I don't know. I think it really changes how I want to draw a rat, right? And then look at the blood droplets are perfect circles. That's such an interesting way to do blood, and it's something I'm gonna have to do in one of my next drawings. If someone's getting stabbed or something, is just try blood that way, because it's just dot 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 dot. It's not like a big fountain, which I think most people that's how they illustrate it. So again, a different way, and a different way to show people, right? Look, none of these people's like entire faces are being shown. It's almost top of chest down, which I wonder if that's supposed to represent the animal's point of view. I thought about that rereading this book today. If that's just what the animal sees, and so there is no like human love or whatever. It's the hands that are torturing you with all these implants. But no, now we get to the meat and potatoes of well, the rats are the meat and potatoes, but the side project, the side hoe, if you will, the Animal Weapon 3, or We 3. Oh, everyone clapped. They did the title. A very interesting way to do the title. It's one of the things I remember about this book is, oh, how many times do they spell We 3? But no, now we see that we get to interact with these animals more. The Some senator is watching or learning about it. He turns out he's going to be the president soon, so he wants to learn about his where all his funding's going potentially in a few months, and he becomes horrified of that these things can talk, right? During the kayfabe interview, they talk about how Jim Rugg talks about how he thinks that is God. Now I can't unsee that, and I do wonder if again, that's why we need the artist edition. Was that on purpose, or are we just overthinking it? I am, or one am God. You know, are you God? You know, like later in the book, they'll talk about how these animals are almost godlike. They perceive time, action, movement in 10 times better than a human does. So if you're 10 times better than a human does that make you God in a way? And I think that's a really interesting approach to this book. And also, this is one of the few times I like the dark colors. Is we are probably in a lab. These animals, are like, I know red light's better for you in a way, and it makes sense here. It just looks good. This is a different way you can do color, and I won't argue about it. Whereas some, and later in the book, we'll just get browns, but here it makes sense that a lab would be lit by probably one red bulb, right? Like a dark room. But no, they're yeah, the senator is really shocked by these things, really appalled, because in the next page he already tells them you need to decommission them. What's that mean? Well, little drippy drippy needle in the neck, unfortunately. But not before we get to meet the other two talking animals, the cat, who, I guess we should explain the dog first. The dog, who is named Bandit before he got captured, is your stereotypical dog, not the brightest, but very, he talks in short bursts. He has to spell out Washington, which is the senator's name, right? Just, I feel like he's, dog's a dog, you know, whereas the cat is very, the cat is, I guess a better way to describe this is what they're actually for in the military, because they explain what they are. The dog is said to think of it as a miniature tank, which makes sense for a dog. Throw them in the front lines. I'm sure if there's a sequel to this where they mass produce these things, there's going to be hundreds of these dog things on the front lines. The rabbit is trained to deliver mines and poisonous gas, so like a saboteur. And the cat is an assassin, which I think really fits a cat. Think of a cat who catches birds, catches mice, brings them to its owner. I think of assassin like that, and a rabbit being quick and silent, being able to get in, get out, and drop some turd bombs, which will be in the third issue. But no, we get to see the cat's personality with it being really pissy, not liking anyone, and the rabbit, all it can think about is food, right? And then once we leave the lab, we get that, we're out of the sterile environment, so now we're getting that nighttime color, which, again, maybe that's why you do the coloring like this. So it really shows the change in colors. And just, I don't know if the camera can pick this up, the small details on his face. Just think about that when you're doing faces. What's a mole you can add? What's a blemish, a wrinkle? Because that, I think, can really add character to a character. And here's one of the other showstoppers of this book is Frank quietly figuring out how to show these animals breaking out, because that's what happens. They break out, and it's shown through CCTV footage, and it's so much, it's almost too much to talk about in one sitting, but we're gonna do it, right? We're showing so many different perspectives. One is of the animals, one is of a security guard, one is of the scientist walking with the other scientists. Our main, Denise, I believe is her name, who's their handler, who has a soft spot and can't put these poor animals down. She has to have someone else do it. But she leaves a little Newman style, you didn't say the magic word, virus. And unfortunately, once someone clicks on that, the animals are out and we get to see the chaos. And here we're seeing, look at all those different colors, right? The blues, the reds, the yellows. It it really jars the mind, and it makes you reread these pages over and over and over and over again to fully understand them. I will say, reading this online is how I had to do it to begin with, sucked. Because trying to look at all these, I'm sure I lost a lot of panels just trying to, finger scroll. But no, see, you click to save, which that's an interesting way to show that you clicked on it. You just keep zooming, zooming, zooming in, and then you're showing the, we established earlier in this book they can't bite while the restraints are placed. Well, that means the restraints are gone, and I think that's an ingenious way to show it. It's a good way of showing how Frank Quiley and Grant Morrison are good storytellers by, they're great at adding stuff at the beginning and having it pay off either right then and there or later down the road. The animals escape, and we see the chaos of them. They're literally flipping everyone. I don't know if they at least kill 2 people, or maybe they're not dead, but they're probably dead knowing this book. And then flipping all these people. We're seeing, all these perspectives. They're leaving the facility. Oh yeah, she's dead. But yet Denise is wondering, she says, deserve it, kill me, but they don't. They just run past her because that was probably the closest thing they had to, another family member, maybe a mother figure, which that doesn't really pay off if they're. We'll get to it when we get to it, but right, like anyone who is in this book is either dead or come discombobulated, right? And what a great what was this? 2, 4, 6 pages of different but amazing ways to tell a story. Again, think about what you can do to change up your comic to make it different. I guarantee you probably no other book in 2004 had this little 6-page adventure. And now look, a giant look at our characters. And this is why I say sleek anime inspired. The giant feet, just the rounded, hey, that's an Easter egg right there. But no. Excuse me. But no, what a great, and probably one of the other showstoppers from this book is just the giant spread. This is what I want a poster of with We3 right there. And that I'd hang that in my, my room. I love this book that much. I'd love to get a poster of it that isn't the size of a magazine advertisement. I haven't found one yet. But no, I wonder how many times Frank had to draw these characters to get their anatomy right. Figure out what he liked about it, what he didn't like about it. I wonder if this was a concept sketch that he really liked because, it does show, almost all of them in a side profile other than the rabbit. Maybe that was his concept of a side profile and he really liked it. He built on it, But yeah. And now we cut to, and not only did they escape, but a bunch of mice. So, there could be drama, a little bit more drama with all those mice escaping, but I don't think so. But no. What's going to happen now that these animals are released? Well, the very next page, we get our sad that these animals have to have medication or they won't last more than a few days, which really bummed me out the first time I read this. Again, if you really like animals or you have a soft spot for animal comics, this might not be the book for you. But we will see these animals go through the ringer. But that's one of the arguments I hear a lot of people when they talk about this book is this character doesn't she has a body count now, right? She probably killed at least a few people by letting those animals escape, and a lot more throughout the next two issues. But yet she's not even arrested, or she's in custody but not arrested. And now we get to hear how the dogs talk. And look, a whole different color scheme. Bright, sterile laboratory versus nature. Warm colors, cold colors. Figure out how your scenes are going to look. Are they going to look warm? Are they going to look cold? I know that's basic stuff, but this channel is more for the people, starting out as a comic book artist or an artist in general. Maybe not people who are, 20-year vets of drawing a comic, have several comics to their name. So, if I say the basics a lot, I'm sorry, but there's someone out there who doesn't know that, or maybe is still struggling with it. All right, so we're getting the animals, and now, how does their armor look in the trade at that? Let's see. Oop, nope, went too far. Oh. Yeah, the trade's a lot. Let's just flip to. There we go. You can see the trade's a lot brighter. I guess I prefer the trade more because I think the colors look better in the trade. Let me know if you guys can even tell the difference, if you like the difference or not. But let's flip back to this. No, we're getting the animals. How do they communicate to each other? He thought of that. They're not talking perfect. They're not humans. They're animals. So now, the rabbit out now, where boss, out, go, one say oh, one no oh, no stink boss, one say, one no oh. It's like, I'm sure to them they understand it perfectly, but to probably everyone else, everyone is confused as hell what they're saying, right? But that makes sense. They're machines with animals in them, essentially, right? It's a machine with an animal body, you know? And again, they're animals. They're not going to be spouting Shakespeare, I believe is what they say. But no, we have a very somber home. Home, danger here. We three home now. Home, to come, to where? To stay, eat here. To home, right? So they want to go home. Or maybe they think they're home. Which, well, as soon as I saw that, it's very Homeward Bound. Does anyone know that movie? But, what a weird. I just don't get why the armor's like purple or pink on pink, blue, another blue, right? Why, if these are covert ops, military things, why do they have Easter colors? I've always wondered that, and maybe that's the manga anime inspired armor is the bright colors in a way. Again, love to get the artist edition, and maybe that's answered, right? But Fly to the Valkyries, right? In the words of Eddie P, we three know home now, as the death is coming and death is leaving, right? So maybe that's the metaphor. Wherever these things go, death is going to be following, coming for them, right? These things are killing machines, and they're in a world where there's a lot of squishy things. So next two issues, we'll see how these killing machines operate. So what a really strong first issue. Really strong start of a series. Usually first issues kind of suck in ways, they have to play by their own rules, kind of limit themselves to what they do. Not this book. This book shows you how much these things kill. They show you how deadly these are and let them out. We get the call to adventure. We get, everything in this first issue, and sometimes that's what you need to do. So if you're struggling on how to pace a first issue, definitely look at this. Look at this for a lot of reasons. And there was actually a quote from this book I wanted to say in the question section. Let's see. So, Frank Quiley is talking to assistant editor Maria Huner. And let's see. The question is describing, or nope. The question is, what is the opportunity to draw animals like strange cybernetic suits? Oh, no, I'm sorry. Was it the opportunity to draw animals in strange cybernetic suits that drew you to this project? So, just because you can draw these animals in some mech suits, was that the reason you drew it? And Frank quietly answers, describing We3 like that is like describing Thanksgiving dinner as a dead bird with some bits of plants. It's true, but it doesn't do justice to the end product. This project marks a new way of working for us. We've been getting together on a regular basis, looking through my development drawings and talking about the function of the technology and how it affects the form and design of the animal suits. This luxury of preparation is something we've extended to the storytelling as well. The designs for the suits had to fit the anatomy of the animals wearing them, but they were influenced by the armor of insects like the flea and animals like the pangolin, also by the shells of classic American cars and modern Japanese mopeds. So, I guess I was right thinking these were insects my first time I read this book. That's to the part. Yep. See, like probably the antenna is the main reason I thought that. But now, I can totally see that American car influence. The sleek Mustang, Plymouth, just all those classic, you know, muscle cars or right before muscle cars, like some of the early Plymouths, that sleek, like shell design. I could see these things with a little Chevy emblem on them. So, and again, one of the other things, he talked about developmental drawings. Where the hell's the We3 Artist Edition then? I'm sure he has all of them. Or if not, can I get some of those things to hang on my wall? I'd love some Frank Quietly original work. But no, to sum it up, if you want a great sci-fi book, check this book out. If you want a great animal book, that is sad, check this book out. If you want more Grant Morrison and Frank Quietly in your life, check this out. I'm sure these are cheaper books. I'm really interested what else came out in 2004 to see what this book stacked up against at some award shows, which I don't think it won any awards, but let's see what it might have unfortunately lost to. So we'll definitely have to keep an eye out for the other two. I want to look at the other two, not the trade, to see, how the colors stack up. So I'll definitely be keeping an eye out for that. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you. It helps us a lot. When you watch these videos to the end, it pumps the algorithm, pumps these videos out more to people who probably like this style of content. And if you found something you liked, found something interested, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification so you never, ever forget to watch a video of Paper Cuts Included, a comic book YouTube channel whose sole goal is to make videos and have a good time. Well, in the famous words of Jim Rugg, the marching orders, make more comics.